So abundance has been the theme for the last 3 talks. And by the way, the sound sounds a little hot up here. Thank you. Abundance has been the subject of 3 different talks so far. This is the 3rd in the series. And I hope it's been helpful because abundance is really what we're seeking in our lives. A feeling of not just enough, or as Susan and I used to talk about, even Steven, just getting what we need when it happens. No, abundance, more than enough. A feeling that allows us to be able to give freely because we're not concerned that we won't get what we need. And faith is a crucial component of experiencing abundance. And in the Bible, Hebrews 11:1 is perhaps the most quoted definition of faith. And I'm going to read several different translations of this famous passage because each one is presented a little differently. And by doing this, it sometimes, at least for me, helps me get a more well-rounded or more full understanding of, because different words can sometimes make you go down one path. And if you get different ways of hearing it and thinking about it, it sometimes gives you a more full, a broader understanding. So from the King James Bible, it reads, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." The New Heart English Bible reads, "Now faith is being confident of what we hope for, convinced about things we do not see." The Weymouth New Testament, "Now faith is a well-grounded assurance that which we hope for, and a conviction of the reality of things which we do not see." The New Living Translation, "Faith shows the reality of what we hope for. It is the evidence of things we cannot see." And from the Aramaic Bible in plain English, and for those of you who may not know, Aramaic is the language that is often considered the language Jesus would have spoken. So this is a translation from that language. From the Aramaic Bible in plain English, "Now faith is the conviction concerning those things that are in hope, as if it were these things in action, and the revelation of those things that are unseen." Now, we all have examples we've experienced where our worries and our fears, felt real. But we also have had those experiences where just innately, we just knew things were going to work out. I mean, you've had that experience, right? It was a bad situation, but something in your heart calmed you. It's going to work out. And ultimately, it did work out. We can all point at those examples. And so think about that in your own life because, again, we've all been there at some point or another. But we also know that much of the time, these are not the examples that we remember and think about when it gets difficult. Our minds, our memories, and our egos are always ready and waiting to remind us of those times when it didn't work out the way we hoped. When we're facing some kind of life challenge, I think it's the nature of human beings and the mind to think the worst. And really, part of the basis of really developing faith is noticing that behavior. And when you notice that you're starting to go down that path of thinking the worst, the practice then is to say, wait, I don't know how it's going to work out. And if I'm going to imagine something, because that's what we're doing when we're projecting into the future, oh, the worst is going to happen. It takes the same amount of energy to imagine the best happening, right? And thoughts are things. We're going to hear about thoughts being things. And sometimes the thought that we offer that's love and good and hopeful turns the tide. Don't discount the idea of your own ability, your own energy, your own love. You are more than you often give yourself credit for being. Abundance and faith in God is the ability to maintain confidence and poise and remain devoted to the belief that our abundance is real, that it's here now, made manifest. And when we cultivate and practice techniques that help reinforce our faith, we're more prepared when we face these challenges. Now, when I say practice, that's exactly what I mean. The example I'm going to share is the example of an athlete who's preparing for whatever sport or thing that they do, because it's a great example of determination. We've seen the Olympics, the World Championships, people who have dedicated their lives to being the best at what they do. They exercise in a way that prepares their body and their minds, because it's both. You know, you don't just do an exercise. Your mind has to learn and accept and realize, wow, I really can do this. They focus and recognize when their minds are focused on what they're doing, and they recognize when they're distracted. That is something that can prevent them from being their best. They eat good foods, that are nutritious. Now, I can certainly tell you, my whole life I've kind of struggled with, he eats well, he doesn't eat well. My wife is so wonderful at preparing meals that help me, and it's such a blessing. But, before I met her, I didn't always really focus on that so much. So we have to do these things. And I'll, again, return to the idea of the athlete. At the end of each day, the person that's in the top of their field, what do? They reflect on how their day unfolded. They're willing and ready to, compliment themselves and say, wow, great job in what I did in this aspect. And also, they're honest with themselves about where they could have done better, where they need to improve. They get enough rest that is really helpful for them to recover. And when they wake up the next morning, what do? They recommit themselves to being that person and those behaviors that are going to have the best chance to lead them to the success that they're seeking. It's not just about that athletics, folks. When we talk about abundance, or we talk about feeling good about our lives, or you come to church and you're hoping to hear something, guess what? It takes work. It takes commitment. And all of us, to varying degrees, we do what we do, and sometimes we're focused and do that, and sometimes we don't. I'm no different. I've not always been the person who's even should be up here talking about this. I've definitely been the person sitting out there listening. And then before that, not even sitting out there and listening. Just, why does everything always happen to me? I don't know. They keep talking about that stuff, but I don't know. So we're all at a different place. But if we really want to feel better about our lives, it takes a commitment to grow. It takes a commitment to know where we're at, and we should be envisioning in our hearts what would it look like if we were our best selves? What would we say? What would we do? Who are the kind of people we would hang around with? Like-minded people? People who uplift us? Probably so. Charles Fillmore described and defined faith as the perceiving power of the mind linked with the power to shape substance. Now, rather than blind faith, he viewed faith as an innate spiritual faculty. In fact, one of the 12 powers that he talked about and is a central part of teachings in unity. Faith allows us to mentally mold infinite spiritual possibilities into physical manifestations, bringing that which doesn't exist into existence because we see it. He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, everything starts with mind. The great accomplishment starts with a thought and an idea and a focus to bring that into truth, bring that into being. Now, it's easy to have faith when life feels good, right? You've all felt what it feels like when you're in the flow. I mean, you've heard that term, right? Things are happening and you just kind of feel like, whoo, man, this happened and then this happened and boy, I'm pretty excited because I think this is going to happen and then it does and, you feel like you're on a roll. You've felt that way, right? Right? We've all been there. But at the same time, we've also all been where it seems like nothing is going right. Where every decision and choice that we make, as much as we try, it just doesn't turn out right. And if that continues for any length of time, we may end up feeling like nothing we do is going to work out and that we're just going to continue feeling the suffering that we feel. When this happens, we can lose our faith. Or perhaps better said, perhaps what we've done is changed the focus of our faith. We start having faith that things are not going to work out. Oh, I'm sure of it. It never does. Why would this be any different, right? So, Charles Fillmore said, you must first enter into the understanding that God, omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, is the source, and that you can draw on this source without limit. Now, I want to take a moment and have an aside and say, in this talk, we're in church, I'm using the word God. And that's not unusual in a church, right? Not unusual. You're probably going to hear it. But my background personally is I grew up with not a religious family. And I know that many people who find unity and come to unity come from religious backgrounds where sometimes even just hearing the word conjures up a feeling of dogma or a feeling that isn't pleasant, doesn't feel expansive. So I offer you to listen to this talk and any talk with the language of your heart. Because if instead of the word God, you'd prefer to think of it as the universe or the Christ consciousness or spiritual awareness, whatever it means to you, if you're going to practice and have the opportunity to feel better, you have to be willing to open yourself up to the love that is the foundation of these kinds of messages, of this talk, because it's given in the spirit of love for you, with hope that it helps. And part of that understanding, that idea of God, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, is for us to realize that there are aspects of life that are more than we are, bigger than we are. There are forces and energies and abilities that are beyond our own. And that's a truthful statement. Beyond our ability to know, beyond our ability to understand, beyond our ability to describe it or define it, beyond all that we are, at least beyond that of the physical perspective and mind that this body can do. And this is really difficult for many of us because our egos and our minds are always telling us, that's true. Oh, that over there, that's not true. Oh, I believe that because it fits in something I think is right. Well, I don't believe that because that's just out there and I just don't believe that. Our egos and our minds are thinking machines. It's what they do. We have to notice this and recognize there is more to life and to God than we oftentimes give credit for. And for the moment, I want to focus for just step back. One of the talks, the first talk in this series, was about Buddhism and abundance. And in Buddhism, specifically in Zen Buddhism, there's a practice called don't know mind. Now, don't know mind is a concept that teaches us how we can let go of judgments and expectations and preconceived ideas and beliefs. It involves observing the present moment with open curiosity and accepting uncertainty without rushing to analyze or explain it or to control your experience or the situation. We often say, let go and let God, right? By pausing the internal dialogue of I know, you open yourself up to direct and fresh experiences. You listen more deeply. You gain greater resilience that carries through with you in your day-to-day life. Because losing faith always starts with allowing our minds to limit and define what the acceptable outcome is supposed to look like. You know, and when the result comes and it's different than what we hoped for, different than what we made up our minds is supposed to happen, well, we may just give up on our faith. We may say to ourselves, God got it wrong. Ever said that? Ever thought that? That's not supposed to be how this worked out. Now, sometimes when we feel this way, not always, but we know in our hearts when sometimes the reason it didn't work out was because of something we did, right? We behaved in an unkind way. We said an unkind thing. We were not thoughtful or helpful. And if we gloss over this when we're upset and just blame everybody else, you know, if there is an impediment to experiencing abundance in your life, that's it. Dishonesty to ourselves with our lives and what we've done and how it may have affected others is guaranteed to block the feeling of abundance, of happiness. You know, my father said to me early on in my life, you know, and it was the classic, I don't want to go to school. You know? And he said, are you really sick? Yeah, Dad. I'm really sick. He said, well, you know, you can stay home, but I can tell you this, it's a truth, Paul. There's no such thing as guilty joy. So yeah, you can stay home. But if you're not really sick, I tell you, all day long, you're going to be thinking, I wasn't really sick, but I got away with it. But that's the truth. The truth is what we're seeking. So when we were wrong and we experience upset, or others let us know that they were upset with something that we did, this is not God getting it wrong. Sometimes, for us to grow, our bad behavior requires an unpleasant result. Now, if and when that unpleasant result helps us, gives us a new strength and a new conviction to be honest with ourselves about it and to make a commitment to behave differently in the future, and then we actually do that, then guess what? That difficult time has actually helped us move towards our better self. The truth has set you free. But we also know that there are plenty of times, and I would say this is really what I think most of us think is maybe most of the time. It's not something we just did or that we're really responsible for. Life is hard, right? Sometimes we're in a relationship that just doesn't feel right. We don't feel the love that we were hoping for. We're in a job that just feels like a dead end and we don't see any way out of it. When we're faced with a health challenge or someone we love is facing a health challenge, we may lose hope. The very hope that's essential to have. That's key to our faith. That's key to this unseen force that we can't point at. But when we lose our faith, we stop believing it. And when this happens, it can actually lead us to thinking that we're unworthy. Right? There are cultures, even here in America, but certainly in Eastern cultures, they'll point at something bad that happens to someone, and they'll say, well, I wonder what their family did, what their ancestors did. They're to blame. No, life is just hard sometimes. Things happen. And Jesus, in the Gospel of Mark, reminds us that our own opinion of our worthiness does not have to affect the strength and confidence of our faith. Now, this story appears in Matthew as well, but here we're going to discuss the telling of Mark in Mark 7, because this telling emphasizes that the person themselves feels unworthy, but does not in any way let that diminish his faith. So with that setup, Mark 7 and the faith of the centurion. When Jesus had concluded his discourse and teaching of the people, he went to Capernaum. There, a highly valued servant of a centurion was sick and about to die. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent some of the Jewish elders to ask him to come and heal his servant. They came to Jesus and pleaded with him earnestly. This man is worthy to have you do this, for he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with them. But when he was not far from the house, the centurion had sent friends with this message: Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not consider myself worthy to come to you. But just say the word, and my servant will be healed For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell one to go, and he goes, and another to come, and he comes. I tell my servant to do something, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. He turned to the crowd following him and said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such great faith." And when the messengers returned to the house, they found the servant in good health. So let's talk about this. The foundation of the centurion's faith was not based on whether he thought of himself as worthy of seeking help from God. He differentiated between his thoughts about himself, his fears, his worries, and still fully believed that Jesus was able to command a power that could heal his servant. Now, it's also important to identify the source of the healing that took place. Now, this is the way I see it. This is the way I take it. The miracle for the centurion and his servant was God in action, not Jesus directly. Jesus was the conduit for the God to act through. And to me, the centurion's words confirm this and confirm that he believed this when he said, "I am also a man under authority." The centurion's authority didn't come from himself. It came from Rome. It came from Caesar. It was given to him. He was then allowed to act with that authority. And he recognized the connection that Jesus had with a power, God, that was beyond the limits of a human being, like we've talked about. The centurion's faith in God's ability as the source to heal his servant. And Jesus was the opportunity to communicate with that source. What he failed to see and believe was in his own ability to communicate with God, to communicate directly. The understanding that Charles Fillmore and the great teachers of oneness and love are trying to teach us is that we too are conduits to flow the power and abundance of God through us, into our lives, into the world. Jesus said, "I myself can do nothing. It is the Father within that does the works." Jesus proclaimed the truth of our being, our connection to God and Spirit when he said, "The kingdom of God is within you, is within us." He said, "You are the light of the world. We are the light of the world. And greater things than these, so shall you do." You know, often our feeling of abundance and happiness in our life becomes more clear as we get older. When we reflect on our lives, it's normal to come to appreciate and be grateful for where we are right now, the person that we are right now, for the life that we have. When we reflect, we realize that even the most difficult things we've ever gone through, and we can all point at tragedies and difficulties and things we never thought we would recover from. But if we're honest with ourselves, we know that if we changed a single thing, we wouldn't be who we are today. We wouldn't have come to the conclusions, the appreciation, the gratitude that we feel right now. And if you're at a point in your life right now where what you want is to change, to feel the very abundance that I'm talking about and that we're talking about here, then you know what to do. It's going to take practice. We have to imagine what our life would look like if we were expressing and behaving in our best and highest self, in our best and highest way. We have to look at what we did today. And when we wake up tomorrow, we have to remember that is our goal, just to do better than we did the day before. Because every day, even just a little improvement over time, and before you know it, you are living your best life. You're experiencing the abundance. That's not just this message, it's the abundance that is you, that's flowing through you and in your life, and can be something that you experience and are confident in every day. So here we are. We've considered ideas and teachings from the very foundations of human history, through the great spiritual teachers and the thinkers and those around us today, sharing their thoughts of wisdom, living in the present moment, living in the now. If we look back and we recognize that the Buddha taught, we have to watch our thinking. We have to be ever mindful. Because as he said, what we think, we become. He taught that noble behaviors, noble actions, right thinking, right action, these are what we would express as our best selves. He taught us to let go of selfish wants and desires and practice gratitude for what we have right now. You know, so often it's, I don't have, instead of, actually, my life is pretty full. And when we recognize this and feel this gratitude, what actually happens is we find we want less. We need less. We're not ever searching for something to fill a void, and desiring more. And this feeling of abundance is what allows us to freely give our time, our attention, our gifts, a smile, a kind word, and notice when that would make all the difference in someone's life. As Krishna taught, when we devote ourselves to believing that we are one with God, never separate, even in difficult times when Maya delusion makes us forget who we are. When you meditate and practice calming your mind, calming your thoughts, you start to experience that peace and that feeling of love that is the true self that you are. As Jesus taught about the flow of abundance when he said, "Give and you shall receive." And he wasn't just talking about receiving barely enough to make it through. He described it as receiving a good measure, pressed down, overflowing into your lap. And repeatedly, before performing the miracles described in the Bible, he gave thanks and acknowledged that the Father always hears and knows his prayers. Just as we should keep our faith, even when we can't know how the power of God is working, always for our best good. working to help us change our thinking, working to help us change our behaviors so that, again, we can grow and become our best selves. And as Charles Fillmore said about faith and things unseen, he said, there is an invisible thought stuff on which the mind acts, making things through an operation of a law not yet fully understood by man. Every thought moves upon this invisible substance in increasing or diminishing degree. When we praise the richness and fullness of God, this thought stuff is tremendously increased in our mental atmosphere. It reflects into everything that our mind and our hands touch. Abundance, happiness, at its very core, it's love in expression. So I'll close with this. A physician once said, the best medicine for all human beings is love. And when someone asked, what if it doesn't work? The physician smiled and replied, increase the dose. Love and blessings to you all.